Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome to Take This Talks. Now, usually, the boss, Eve Crevichet, is here talking to everybody because she knows a lot of wonderful people in the game industry, and we want to make sure we bring a lot of wonderful voices to you all so you can find out sort of the ins and outs of the game industry, what's going on. Oh, Dr. B is choppy.
Oh no.
Shoot. One moment. Let's fix that. Osama, of course Osama sounds perfect. Of course
Thank you.
Osama sounds perfect. What are we even questioning about this?
Oh, you're so kind. Whoever said that.
That
Thank
would be
you.
Kelly. Dr. Kelly Dunlap is a huge fan of
Well, I'm
Osama's.
a huge fan of Dr. Kelly Dunlap. So Dunlap, of course. So
She is just wonderful. All right. Any difference in my audio?
I hear you perfectly for the record, but I don't think I'm the parameter here.
All right, let's try that. I really need to get a new input device.
Oh no.
Oh dear. Am I still choppy at all? This is getting obnoxious every time.
Is it just the audio that's choppy? Not the
I,
video?
I All right, let's try that now. Any different? Any different? Tiny bit? No better. Okay, there we go. It's better. I just need to get a new box. I keep I oh, no better. Not no comma better. No better. Well, all right. We're going this way. Fixing it. And you all get to see live troubleshooting being done. Isn't that fun? I was so hoping it was going to be right this time. Let's see here. Output audio channels. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That's the audio track. There we go. Audio. Mono. General. Output. Okay. Bit rate's relatively low enough. Audio. Oh, well, poo. Oh, okay. Any different on this? Roll with it. We'll adjust. Okay, well, and we were just talking before we went live about how fantastic this audio setup is typically. And this is the universe striking me down in my Italian grandmother would call it malocchio, the evil eye that has I bragged. I shouldn't have. That's a shame. Yeah, no. I know you're all here for Osama anyway, so I'll tell you what. Instead of you hearing all my choppy audio, Osama, who are you? You heard it here. My audio hates me in that it is not giving. Oh, gosh. All right. In a moment. It is apparently not giving you any audio, which is a shame. Okay, say something again, Osama. Okay, yeah, that's a problem. All right, let's do this. Osama's being so kind, everybody. Okay, try that. Let's see. Okay, try again. Nope. Oi. All right, let's go. At default. Actually, we are going to remove. And okay, let's try now. Should be. This was.
No?
I swear to everybody, this was working 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, it was.
That we should hear something now. There we go.
Okay, we hear something.
That was working 15 minutes ago.
It's fine. It's fine. It only took a couple of minutes. Not a big deal.
Good God. Okay, well, Osama, since everybody's here for you and we're talking you up, and Dr. Kelly Dunlap, our fantastic community manager, is in the chat talking about how amazing you are, who are you?
My name is Osama Dorias. I'm the lead game designer at WB Games in Montreal, currently working on Gotham Knights. I'm also a game design teacher at Dawson College. I've been teaching for close to 10 years now. I took this semester off. I co-authored the independent game design program years and years back. That's a program I'm currently teaching in, but I'm no longer the coordinator of the program. I've stepped down. I'm just teaching now. In addition to that, I recently started a podcast called The Habibis with two of my Habibis. It's about just, three friends drinking good Arab tea, talking about games and Arab culture and things like that. We're all game devs, so that's one thing we have in common. That's why usually we approach the topic of games from that angle. Like, it's not a review podcast exactly. It's just we talk about our experiences. What else did I do? I'm the co-founder of the Montreal Independent Game Awards. We took a year off last year. We were probably going to come back sometime soon at some point in some capacity. Because of course COVID, a lot of events took some time off because of COVID, and we're no exception. But the Game Awards were running for 5 years before that, so this year would be our 7th iteration if we do something this year. I'm the co-founder. I'm no longer the director. That's Alain Gusella, so I've stepped down from that as well. And you're going to see that's a common theme. I've actually started many initiatives and have stepped down from many of them. And that's actually on topic today.
Well, and so first of all, Dr. Kelly Dunlap, our fantastic community manager, is throwing up links for all of your stuff in the chat. Everybody,
Thank you,
make
Kelly.
sure go follow those links, follow the Habibis, go check out the Montreal Independent Game Awards. Osama has his hand in so many things. You've also done some work with the IGDA, yeah?
That's right. I'm actually the chair of the Muslims in Games Special Interest Group at the IGDA. I've been somewhat inactive recent times. Like they don't know this yet, so they're going to hear this for the first time. But I am looking for a replacement as chair, so that I could, again, on theme, step down, because there was a time where I was doing way too many things, and I guess we'll talk about that in a little bit of time. But yeah, so that's one of my personality quirks, is I say yes to a lot of things eagerly. I go in, I give it my 100%, and after a while I get exhausted, and I'm like, okay, maybe I said yes to too many things that I want to do, so how do I scale back? And it's usually not in my nature to shut things down, especially things that I believe in, so I always look for a replacement and move on to the next thing, rinse and repeat. That's a general overview of how it works, but we could talk about these things in more detail if you'd like.
Oh, no, we're absolutely going to talk about that, because there is an entrepreneurial attitude to that. I mean, there is a sort of startup vibe to that. But that breaking news brought to you by TakeThis.org and your your subscriptions, thanks to people like you, help us have fantastic people like Osama on our programs, and one day not have technical issues. But
Technical issues are part of the game.
they
Don't
really are,
apologize
and
for them. Yeah, it's totally okay.
it's funny whenever people, some of the teenagers, went back in the days when I worked with people directly, they I want to. How do you get up in front of people, and what if you mess up? And I'm like, what do you mean, what if?
What if? Yeah.
What do you mean? Like that is a given. So you do so much. You have done so much. I have no doubt that you will continue to do so much. Did you even mention any of the game jam involvement?
No,
Okay.
there's a lot of other things. So yeah, I have organized game jams and workshops. I was also one of the co-organizers of Game Loop Montreal, and which is like an unconference. So it's a conference, but where people come in and bring their own topics, and we organize roundtables around them. So I co-organized that for 2 years, but I've stepped down since as well, and a lot of other little initiatives here and there that I've forgotten about over the years. But yeah, I mean, I come up with an idea, I start a thing, and give it my 100% and move on from it. But yeah, definitely involved in. I also do mentorship for a few different organizations. In the past, I've done it for Pixels, more recently for Code COVID, and
I've
for
wasted my life.
so, but I mean, I don't know what like. Do you want me to come and just tell you my
No,
rap sheet?
this is mind-boggling that you do so much, and I know for a fact that you have done so much for the game community at large. You're very well loved, and Kelly, and she's not the only one who refers to you as the anthropomorphic personification of a hug. And the it's you've been memed by multiple people, and somewhere in all this you both also make games and
Yes,
have raised a wonderful family.
absolutely.
How?
That's something that I've been trying to figure out for a long time, and I think I think I've come close to the answer recently. Ever since I was really young, I've always known that I was a little bit different than most of my peers in
Okay.
some ways. One of the things, one of the first clues to this was when I was about 11 or 12 years old. I organized a basketball league at my school. I still have friends that I'm still friends with right now who will remember this. I did everything. So basically, I went in, I formed the teams, I organized people into refs. They took the stats. I would go. My dad had a print shop, so I would collate the stats every weekend. I'd print out these big sheets of who plays who next, and I'd come up and walk into classrooms
Oh,
and put them up on the wall. Wait, do you still hear
we had a
me?
subscriber. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
excellent.
A nudist.
Yeah. So I would actually walk into the classroom with the teachers there. And the thing is, that's one thing I learned really quickly is if you walk into a place as if you belong, people will just let you do it. So I'd walk into a different, I had zero permission for any of this. I just came up with the idea and I did it. And I'd like put the stats up, and the students would like stop what they're doing, come up and like look at the stats of this basketball league that I organized. I don't want to like, it was my conception. I don't want to say that I organized it alone because I came up with the idea and I put the rules. But of course, I had a lot of volunteers who would help. But I did this. I started at the age of 11, and ever since then I used to organize chess tournaments. I'm not a good chess player, by the way. I just enjoy chess. So the community center that I used to go to a long time ago, they had tables, and I got them to give me a budget. We had like, we bought chess boards and we bought chess clocks, and I organized a chess tournament. I did the same for spoken word poetry. I organized like nights. I love organizing things that that bring people together.
Yeah,
But I
you
also
do.
just love I also just love doing things. I'm one of my blessings and a curse at the same time, depending on what you look at it, is that I can't really go on vacation. I get bored. After the third day, I don't know what to do with myself, and I wish I could just be doing something. And I learned the hard way. Actually, my wife used to fight me for it. Like she used to be like, "You're supposed to be relaxing." And I said, I can't relax. I'm bored. I got to do something." So she would leave me. Actually, the way for me to be able to do that is I used to bring a laptop with me on vacation. And after we did our day of relaxing or sightseeing or whatever, I'd go to the hotel lobby, coffee shop, whatever I had to do, and not necessarily work on my day job, but work on something. Because if I wasn't working on something, I wasn't happy. I need to be working on something, otherwise I'm sad. Um, Later on in life, and I say very recently, I started to believe, I still believe that I probably have ADHD. I haven't been tested yet. I'm still on my bucket list of things to do, but I have so many things to do that I haven't gotten there yet. But
At some point when you're done managing the 12 communities you've started, then like
yeah,
get done enough, hand it off to somebody else. Get
yes.
tested for ADHD.
It's on my list of things to do. But to be honest, whether I actually have it to the threshold that it's considered ADHD or not, I know for a fact that the coping mechanisms associated with ADHD have helped me tremendously in recent times to focus and to not jump from one thing to the other. Because that's another thing. Even on my job, it's affected me. I'm a generalist game designer by choice. Whenever I was given, whenever I was at any company that I worked in and a project wrapped up, and they asked me if I would rather change to another franchise or stay with the same franchise, I always wanted to change. Whenever I was asked to respecialize, becoming a different kind of designer, or to stay with what I was doing, I always wanted to change. That's how my mind works. I love new challenges. I love trying out new things. Um, I'm not. I should tell the story about how I actually how I authored the independent game design program, because it's actually a funny story. Um,
I'm, I'm just going to kick back with water, family friendly. And I'm just going to listen because this is fantastic.
Okay, so it started when I was about 30 years old, 3 years into the gaming industry. I started a little bit later than most people. I was 27. It was actually my third career. I switched careers a few times. And I was still considered somewhat of a junior game designer at 3 years, like between junior and intermediate, depending on the company. But I really wanted to teach. I loved the idea of teaching. I wanted to teach really badly, and I put it out there. I told people, hey, if anyone's looking for a game design teacher, I would love to, try my hand at it. But everyone's looking for tenure, like rightfully, they were looking for 10-year veterans or people who have more experience or even an educational background. I didn't have the qualifications. I didn't have the minimum qualifications. But because I put it out there, my friend Kevin Lung, who's right now a game designer at Refractor, but at the time I believe he was a game designer at Ubisoft. I had met him at Gameloft. He was a teacher at Dawson College, and he said, "Hey, Dawson is looking for a very specific thing in a teacher, and they're having a really hard time filling it. This might be your opportunity." So what happened is they had a teacher teach narrative, nonlinear level design, more from a narrative approach, open world level design in the Dragon Age engine specifically, because this person worked at EA and used the Dragon Age engine. However, this person just got a job offer, and it was 3 weeks away from class, and class curriculum is already set, and the students are already ready to come in, and they were going to leave the country. So they were not going to be able to continue teaching. And this is we're talking about 11 years ago now. Like, there was no remote teaching back then. It wasn't a easy thing to do. There was no possibility of doing that. So they needed somebody who already knew the Dragon Age engine so that they could teach it, and could not find anyone. They exhausted everyone at EA, and everyone turned it down. They're like, 3 weeks to prepare a curriculum, forget it. So now, not only did they need to find someone who could prepare a curriculum in 3 weeks, they needed to find someone who could learn an editor well enough to teach it in 3 weeks as well. So I saw that as my opportunity. Kevin came in, he said, look, if you want to get your foot through the door, getting into education isn't that simple. This could be your chance. And I agreed with him. So I went and I interviewed. They rushed my interview. It was like the next day or the day after that. They asked me if I'm uh, like I looked through the Dragon Age editor that night, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I don't know it. I don't know how to use this, but I could figure it out. It's an editor. I've used other game editors before. The scripting language is a little bit different, but I'm sure I'll have enough time to do this. However, I didn't know how to create a curriculum. This is not even a thing I knew how to do. So I went in to the interview 100% honest. I told them, listen, I have the motivation, I have the drive, I can do this. I don't know how, but I'm going to figure it out. So they grilled me, they tested me on the spot. They're like, what if a student says this or what if a student says that? I still don't know what I answered well or what I didn't, because I don't, the whole, that was a 2 hour process that was a blur at the end. I'm like, I'll just answer truthfully. And if they don't like me, then, it's fine. Um, they gave me the job. They're like, okay, you start in 3 weeks. I had zero prior teaching experience, zero Dragon Age editor experience, zero experience creating a curriculum, and I was about to start teaching in 3 weeks.
That's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah. But I mean, I convinced them somehow. They thought I could do it, and I convinced myself in the process too. So for the next 3 weeks, and I still had a full time job. I remember I took a couple of days off. I had a full time job at the time, but I took a couple of days off because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna need at least a couple of days of focus to try to see, to try to like learn this editor, right? And I honestly created the curriculum a week in advance each week. So I
So,
kind of
so that joke about you don't have to know the topic. You just have to read 1 week ahead of the students. You actually lived that.
I lived that. So I created a rough outline of what I kind of wanted the students to learn, and what the expectation was, like at the end, what I wanted them to be able to accomplish. It was a just rough idea in my mind, and I just refined it as I went on. I'm like, oh, this topic is taking too long, so I have to make a decision. Am I going to just say, okay, at this level it's okay, or are we going to extend the time for this, so cut out something else? And I had to do that all on the fly, and while still learning the scripting language as I was going ahead. So I essentially had two full-time jobs. Like that's in the time that it took, because normally the teacher already has a curriculum that they've created before, already knows the subject matter well, and is there just to prepare the classes and do assignments. But I had to do all of that at the same time. So essentially that one class took me an enormous amount of time. And because of that, I had to pause everything else I was doing because I was involved in other events and activities, as yeah, of course.
All like 15 things you have going
Yeah.
on at once. So there's this thing I try to do on a daily basis. I maybe you've tried it from time to time. It's called sleep, and I I I don't know how that fits into your life, but again, I try and do it daily.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like now, let's be honest. I'm older. I've slowed down. I don't have the infinite energy that I've had in the past. If I tell you about my busiest time ever, you probably wouldn't believe me.
Well, listen, I think
Um,
about my busiest time ever and don't believe me. You put me to shame.
the busiest time I've ever had, I thought about it in the past, and I know exactly the 1 month period where it was like I was busier than I've ever been in my life. I was sleeping maybe 2 or 3 hours a night for a month. Yeah, it was completely
Nope,
unhealthy.
nope.
Absolutely not something I would recommend to anyone at all. But this was just a series of good and bad decisions, mostly bad, that led to this. So I was working a full time job. I also had a side project, an indie project that I
I'm
ran a
shocked.
Kickstarter for. I, it was a small team. We are about 3 people, more involved, and a few other people who are less involved. All in all, we're about 7 8 people. I ran a Kickstarter. I was still teaching at that time, and I was running the Montreal Independent Game Awards with my partner Sedim, all at once. So this my schedule was ridiculous. It didn't make sense at all. Mostly because I had one day a week one day in the weekend where I wouldn't do any of these things. I would spend time with my family as a rule. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make some sacrifices. I'm not going to see them that much before. Like I'd come home from work and I'd spend a couple hours with them before they went to bed. They were still young at the time. When they'd go to bed, I'd start, doing all the other million things that I had to do. So they had about an hour or two of me per day. They didn't see me in the morning at all. And they were going to lose me for a day on the weekend because I had so much work. So I had to at least have one day where I wouldn't. So I fit everything that wouldn't even fit in a 7-day week in 6 days because I had to make room and time for my family. Not because I had to, because I wanted to, of course, right? So that was probably the busiest time I've ever been in my life. I would never repeat that. I learned a lesson. I came close to a burnout after that month. I took a couple of weeks off from everything, and I just recoup because you cannot function on that little sleep. You cannot function on so little rest.
No, no.
No.
Well, I mean, a lot of friends of mine who have gone through grad school doctoral programs, we joke about, we have to joke about it. Certain times in the program where we just don't remember things
Yeah.
because it was such a stressful blur. And for a lot, for a lot of people in the game industry overall, that's a regular thing. I mean, take this talks about cultural crunch
Yeah.
frequently, and I want to differentiate that between just periodic emergency hours because you're going to have to
Yeah.
you're going to, every now and then, you're going to have to put in some extra hours no matter what industry you're in. But
Mhm.
for those of you who may not know, who are watching this, yes, Team Toadhouse, we know. We tried fixing it. I'm going to be buying a new audio input because this one let me down, and this one is my backup. But the difference between periodic extra hours and cultural crunch is this expectation, whether tacit or overt, that you will be putting in extra hours.
Yeah.
And it chews people up.
Yeah.
Some data that I think the developer satisfaction survey through the IGDA, the last one was something like 1 in 6 developers who are engaged in semi-frequent crunch are putting in more than 70 hours per week, most of the time unpaid. How do you navigate all this and still have a family?
So that, as I mentioned before, and this is not what I'm telling everyone to do, by the way. I'm sharing everything, the good and the bad, my mistakes as well. So this is not do what Osama did. I made so many mistakes, especially when it came to my own health and my schedule. So please don't take this as advice. That's not advice. But what I did, even in the worst times, what I did is family is important to me. They are really very important. And people who follow me on social media see that I actually always took trips with my family. We took tons of pictures. I always took them to the park. I always took them to, even when I was dead and exhausted, I would take them. One of the things that people don't realize is the quality of the time that you spend with them when you're exhausted isn't as good. So even though in my mind I was checking a box, I can tell the difference between when I'm rested and we go out and have fun, and when I'm not rested and I take a day for them. I'm not as focused. I'm not as you mentioned, the blackout moments.
Right.
I'll ask them to repeat their question a few times, and they can tell, they can feel that was a mistake. That is definitely a regret where I thought if I dedicated a day, I could make up for the lost time. You cannot make up for the lost time, and you cannot make up for the lost energy. You don't do as I do. There's an opportunity cost to every opportunity, and sometimes even if the math adds up and you can fit everything in your schedule, it comes out of somewhere else. And for me, it came out of my health, and it came out of quality time with my family. Even if the amount of hours were there, the quality of the time in some situations, especially when I was crunching in previous jobs, it was it took a hit. I'm still happy and proud of myself that I took the time to I didn't just say, you know what, you're on your own. No, I'm happy that I was like, family was important to me, and I made sure I dedicated time to them. But that's not enough. You need quality time. You need time where you're alert, where you're present. And that distinction is really important. And sadly, I didn't really understand that distinction until years later. I made that mistake where I just thought time is time, right? I'm spending time with them. I'm fine.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
physically
Does that
there,
make
so
sense to
they're
you?
getting that
Yeah.
benefit out of what I'm doing.
Yes. And they're getting some, but it's not the same. When you're
Right.
exhausted, it's not the same. Yeah. Like a couple of hours of alertness is better than 8 hours of exhaustion.
So,
Yeah.
with all this mentorship, these mentorship programs that you've been involved in or have likely started, what do you tell people? Because we know for a fact that some of the difficulties that people face in the game industry are things like, I mean, one, long hours, especially depending on which
Yeah.
companies you work for.
Yeah.
There's for some studios, not all, but for some studios, there is this almost professional sports team kind of mentality that
Yeah.
we're all on the same team. You got to put in the extra work, double leg day, bro, for the studio. Be a team player. While at the same time, there's the development. There's the development cycle of now I'm working, now I'm not. A lot of people are contractors and freelance, and that's how they do. One of the statistics I believe we cited in our white paper, our mental health state of the industry white paper, is on average people have 3.2 different employers in a 5-year period. That is an unstable life.
Yeah.
And you're talking about creating stability and presence for your children. What do you say to people that you're mentoring?
It's incredibly difficult to how do my approach is to be honest but compassionate. I try to do that as much as possible. My students will attest to this. The every year, the people I mentor the most, the juniors I spend time the most with are my students, and they come up with these questions at the end of each class. If we still have time left over, and I always answer truthfully. I always tell them the rough reality, the truth of what it is, um, because people need to be informed. I'm not doing anyone any favors when I'm hiding anything, but at the same time, when I tell them about the bad, then they'll believe me about the good. That way, there's trust that builds between that. This industry isn't for everyone, and that's okay. There's different people are in different, like, have different expectations from what the industry is, and I think it's important for me to address that. A lot of people, especially students, when they come in, they don't realize what it is to do the work. A lot of times there's just this romanticism or this this glorification of what the job is, but they don't realize that for the longest time, the reason that they're going to come in, that they want to come into the industry, they don't even get that. Like the scratching that creative itch. A lot of juniors, depending on the size of the company, depending on which company, um, that it's not what they imagine. The They're going to have to, like, I let them know that they're going to have to redo a lot of their work because of changes that happen up top. That's really hard to do. That's why, like, the iterative process is something I hammer in. Like, don't be, kill your babies, don't be married to it, that kind of thing. I tell them about a lot of the different companies. I'm not going to name names, but the ones that I know stories about, if they ask me directly, what about this company? What about that company? I'll tell them, well, this is what I've heard. I have a friend here and they said this and they said that. So if you have and this is common practice. Everyone does it in the industry. If people think people don't talk, everybody talks. This is normal. And I am very generous with that information to my students. I tell them that company is going to pay you better. You're going to have a prestigious game. If you have the energy and if you could tough it out for 2 or 3 years, you can pick where you're going to work afterwards. Do you have the energy? Is this something that you're capable of doing? That other company, not as prestigious. They work 9 to 5. Everyone I know there is extremely happy. Is that something that fits you more? Try to give them as much of the reality of it as possible. One of my favorite jobs I've ever had, which was a game job, was the least prestigious job I've had at the same time. So I worked at a company called GEE. It used to be called DTI when I was hired. Now it's GEE Media. We made games for airplanes. I don't mean flight simulators. I mean the games you play
Right
in
on
flight
the
entertainment.
seat.
Yes. Actually, the reason that I went to this company, it's because when I was looking for a place that would allow me to work on my own projects, because I like, even though I worked at different companies before, I had this creative itch that wasn't getting scratched, and I needed to work on my own projects. And all the other companies had non-compete clauses that didn't allow you to work on your own. Eventually, I found others, but this was the first one in Montreal that I heard about, where you work 9 to 5. I was there for 2 years. I did less than an hour of overtime the entire 2 years I was there. And I'll explain why. Their structure was very different. So it wasn't a video game company. It was a company that also made video games. It was a company that had the entire entertainment device. They were responsible for it. So primarily, the entertainment that they used to provide was movies. They also had, the app that showed you, where you were over the map. And I even designed a couple of apps that were not games. I designed a jet lag calculator to tell you when you should go to sleep, to correct your sleep schedule, based on based on science that was not mine, because I'm not the person who's going to dictate that. But I gamified that. Um, I worked there for 2 years, and it was very different than any other company, any video game company I've ever worked in. The games at the beginning, we had a mandate to make 12 games a year. That's it. These games were going to be added to the catalog. They could be of various sizes. Some were more ambitious, some were smaller, but we had control over that. And so we designed 13 games a year, a baker's dozen, literally, so that if something doesn't work out, we could scrap it and be okay. If the prototype wasn't fun, we'd be like, okay, not that one. But in both years I was there, we released 13 games per year because it just worked out. So, and when a game is done, they kind of overlap and they have different teams. I was the lead designer on all the teams at the same time. Sometimes I was the designer on a game, but the lead of another one where I had a designer on. It was small teams. But when a game was done, it would go into next year's catalog. So there was no fanfare, there was no release date. It was just, okay, I guess that's done. There's a couple of bugs. We'll fix it later. Let's start on the next one. That was it. And we moved on to the next one. But we worked 9 to 5. We had our lunches off. Nobody dreamt of doing any overtime. There was no reason to. The way that the company was set up was extremely healthy, and they had a lot of respect for the employees in that sense. And because of that, I was able to do all the different side projects. That's when I did my Kickstarter. That's when I worked. That's when I was teaching. That's when I was able to do all those other things that I was interested in. Granted, I overdid it, but that's not the point. The point is, in that period, I made a choice to leave a more prestigious company to go to a less prestigious company because it allowed me the freedom to do different things that were important to me. I know a lot of people who have this company in their head when they come into the gaming industry. I want to work for this company, or I want to make a game that's big, like as big as this game that influenced me in the past. And I was one of these people. Of course, I had the bucket list of companies I would love to work at, or people I wanted to work in. And that changes for a lot of people. I would say even for most people. Start speaking to a lot of veterans. I know I'm going to do this without naming the names of the companies, but that's going to make it a little bit more complex because I just don't want to paint it in the wrong way. But I had a friend who had one such company in mind. He actually came into industry because he wanted to work at this company. We were at another company together, and he got this dream job. He got an offer at this dream job, and he was ecstatic. This is like, it's one of the big ones. If you ask people what are the big companies that you want to work on in the gaming industry, it would probably come up in top 3, top 5 of most people's lists, right? And he got an offer there, and he went and he worked on one of their most prestigious games. I checked in, we kept in touch. I saw him at GDC, and I asked him, how's it going? 2-3 months in, dream job. I love it. It's amazing. I can't believe it. I made it. Saw him maybe about a year later. How's it going? Eh, it's okay, I guess. I'm starting to look around a little bit. What's wrong? Nothing really. It's just, I'm gonna see if there's something better for me out there. Asked him a year later, and he had nothing good to say about the company at that point. I'm not gonna draw conclusions because that's not the point. The point is, this is one case that was very specific, but I know many people who follow the same chain of thought. Basically, they have this dream company project, whatever, and when they sign up to it, they see what the reality is, and many of them are like, you know what, that's fine. This is what I signed up for, and they have their own lives on the side, and they could find happiness. And others, they get completely disenchanted, and they either leave that company or leave the industry completely as a result, because the reality is never what's publicized, and that's the truth across the board. Everyone, nobody talks about their failures. Nobody talks about the bad that happens. Everyone just is open about the good, but hides the bad, right? So you have to keep that in mind. And everyone's looking at the dream. They look at the romanticized version of these companies and these stories.
I'm going to create
but
the next whatever. I'm going to create the next Minecraft. I'm going to create the next Mario. I'm going to create
exactly.
And it's going to be my name, me.
Yes, but the truth is, people get pleasure from different things. People get sense of fulfillment from different things, and that might not be what gives you the most fulfillment. I love being a game designer, and I go on record saying that my favorite thing in the world to do is teach. That's actually where I get most of my fulfillment. It's actually teaching, not game design. And I love being a game designer. And I cannot see myself doing anything other than game designing unless it's teaching. It's pretty much my end of career goal, is to eventually transition from game design to teaching. I never would have imagined when I started in the industry. I knew I wanted to teach. Like, I always had this. Like, I always saw myself as going down that path to a certain extent. I never thought I would enjoy it more than game design, but I gave myself a chance. And I know a lot of people who do that. They go into the industry and they want to do one thing, and then if they let themselves just consider other possibilities, they'll see that they might be better at. They might enjoy other things. Otherwise, if you're a little rigid, what ends up happening is more likely than not, from what I've experienced, is you'll end up leaving the industry. You'll end up burning out. And there are a lot of reasons for burnout, but you'll end up burning out because the thing that drove you, the thing that fueled your passion, ended up being not exactly what you expected it to be. And that's really disheartening for a lot of people.
Well, and there's something to be said for having these sort of honest conversations with people. Like, people think about the glory, people think about the outcome, but they often don't think about the process of getting there. And it sounds like you're not quite as pessimistic as Dr. Tom Rapp and I were the other week when Dr. Rachel Coward, our research director, asked the two of us, what advice would you have for people getting a doctorate in psychology? And almost at the same time, we were like, don't. And it's not that we don't want people in this industry. It's just the fact that the reality of the process is so different from what people think it is.
Yeah.
And we want people to go in informed, know what the opportunity costs are, to use a term that you so insightfully brought up. And it sounds like you're doing the same thing. That you need to understand that you're going to pay your dues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you are not going to join a AAA studio and be their lead designer right off the bat. I don't care how good you think you are. You are going to be a junior dev. You are going to be doing repetitive work, and you're going to be repeating that work when people want changes, and you're going to work your way up. And it's not glorious at first, but you need the drive to basically pay your dues. But also different, and it sounds like you're bringing up the idea that even at bigger companies, there may be isolated experiences that you may not have, but also that different teams have different vibes. Especially the biggest studios, you can't just paint them with one broad brush.
Even on the same project,
Yeah.
different team lead, even in the same department, different team leads can give their employees different experiences, wildly varying experiences.
So you can't go into this industry, especially with the idea that there is one game dev experience.
No. That's why I actually always advise people to pick up as many mentors as they can, as many as they can, because just listening to me is a mistake, because I have my own experiences and I speak to a lot of people and I try to adjust them, but I'm human and I could give you the wrong advice. If you speak to a lot of different people, maybe you'll find someone who you vibe with more, or who you click with more, or who understands your situation or what you want to get out of it more. And that is beneficial in a lot of different ways, because you're going to get wisdom and insight and knowledge from these people, but you also access to their networks, and their different perspectives. So just, talk to people, befriend them as much as possible, and try to build trust between them so that they could actually tell you the truth of the reality. And consider the different like other, if you really want to make games, consider that there are paths that are more like, I know some people, from judging from my students, who actually don't want to be in AAA. They just want to be indie because they want the full creative freedom, and they think that that's great, but have no idea that they're going to have to run a business or probably struggle financially, or the other difficult things that can come from being an indie. And others are the other way around. They want to be in AAA because they think they're going to climb the ladder and become creative directors and whatnot, but they don't know about all the difficulties that come with that as well. But they don't consider that the industry is way bigger than this. You could be making VR games or AR experiences. You could be gamifying apps. You could be working in the mobile world. You could be working on children games. You could be working on, there's a whole medical field about making games to help people with physiotherapy. There's a lot of different ways that you could make this your main profession, if that's your ultimate goal. And some of those might fit better with what you want to get out of life or not. But a lot of my students, what they find is actually the answer for them is that they want to make games as hobbies, and they want to have something else to earn their livelihood. And that is a healthy way to think as well. It's not, you don't have, just because you want to make games doesn't mean it has to be what earns you, like what sustains you, right? You could make it just your creative output, and you could have something else, a day job, and not because okay, how do I phrase this? One of the problems, one of the reasons that people fall out of love with the games industry is because they, like me, and I went through this in my first company, when they didn't let me have my side project, when I had all these ideas of games I wanted to make, and I realized I'm never going to make them if I stay in this company. It's just not a possibility. I got really sad. I was borderline depressed, because I'm like, this is not how I imagined it to be. And I sought another job, an easier job, a 9-to-5 job that would allow me to work on my side project, and I was much happier in that situation. And a lot of people who leave games do that. Some people who leave games do that. Other people just fall out of love with making games completely, and that's a lot more dangerous. So like, just consider all the possibilities and really take some time and think about what it is about game making that motivates you. What it is. Everyone's different.
Well, and you bring up a really interesting point, that what is it that you want as your ultimate goal?
Yeah.
And reflecting it back on my own experiences, before I started graduate school, I thought that really the end goal in psychology was to have a private practice, and I'd be doing therapy with people, all day, every day. I don't do that. I actually don't. I don't see clients. I'm not a licensed independent practitioner. I do policy and education with what I was trained to do. And I had no idea there were so many different avenues of career paths when I first started. And it sounds like you're saying something similar, that there are possibilities. You and I have a mutual friend, Emily Grace Buck, who
Yes.
got her start just designing PC or console games.
That's right.
So how do people discover that so they can figure out a route that is both sustainable for them and in line with their priorities both inside the industry and outside?
So that's the tricky part, because just getting an interview these days is difficult. So I'm not going to say the advice I would give an intermediate is not the same advice I would give a junior or I would give a senior.
Okay.
For in most situations, if you're a junior and you get an interview, take the interview. And if you get many, then you're in a position to choose the best of out of all of those. Just try to cast as wide a net as possible. When you're, I know we're in COVID times, it is more complicated, but hopefully we're going to get out of COVID times at some point. When you're in a networking event, yes, hopefully there's, our reality will change a little bit, because this COVID makes networking more complicated. No one's going to deny that, right? It's for some people it's easier. The vast majority, it's much harder. But when you're in those situations, just keep don't discount people who come from other discipline. Sorry, other. I've worked in mobile. I've worked in flight entertainment. I've worked on VR. I've worked on AR. I've worked in AAA. I've worked in indie. I've done all the loop, because that's, as I mentioned before, that's just my personality. I love new challenges. I love jumping from one thing to the next. I know not everyone is out there, but I do know that these opportunities, when I first started, I'm not going to hide anything. I was looking more to be in AAA. I thought that was where I was going to, I had this image of what AAA was. And I kind of looked past the other opportunities whenever I saw them. I didn't apply to those companies. So that was from my side. And as people were not getting back to me, I cast a wider net and a wider net and a wider net. So I'm not going to tell people things like, the reality is a little bit different now. I'm not going to tell people cast as wide a net as possible from the very beginning. That's it takes time and energy to customize a portfolio and to apply for different companies. But what I will say is at least take some time to reflect at the beginning and think about what part of game making excites you, and see if you can figure that out with yourself, by yourself, or if you're lucky enough to have mentors to talk it through with them, to see if there's something that maybe you're not considering. Maybe there's an adjacent field. Maybe there's a new opportunity that you're just not thinking about. One of my friends didn't ever expect to do this. We worked together at a company called Minority, which was an indie company. And then he transitioned to work for a company called Gentronics, where he makes games that are physiotherapy apps that help people who have a hard time walking to walk better, and it gamifies it and everything. And that's not a thing he ever considered before. But when they reached out to him, he was like, you know what, I'll take the call. That's all he said. I'll take the call. Next thing I know, he was like, you know what, this is my calling. And he's been there for years, I think 5 or 6 years now. And I don't see him ever. He has an incredible work-life balance. He has a sense of fulfillment. He works on his own creative little games on the side because he has a schedule that allows him to do that. He is happy and he is helping people. And that is maybe what you want to do. I know I I actually posted on Twitter a while back. I asked game devs, what is it that you want? What do you consider success in your game? And I got a whole sort of assortment of different answers that were very different, all valid and very different. Some wanted award-winning games. They wanted the recognition of their peers. They wanted to make a game that other game developers looked at and said, you did something new. You did something interesting. I like what you did. Others just want to see the joy in players' faces. Others actually want their game to be played by as many people as possible. And others want to be they want to be financially compensated for their endeavors. And everyone, it is like a Venn diagram of, where do you sit? Like everybody wants a little bit of this. Nobody's going to be like, I don't want. Yeah. But what is it that motivates you and drives you more? And if your answer is all of these, then you're not giving a proper answer. Like you really should give it more thought and think about what part of games do you like to make more? What's the part of the game making process do you enjoy doing the most? And what's the outcome? And from that, maybe you'll find a new solution. Maybe you want, like, maybe it's a creativity. It's like, maybe for you it doesn't matter how many people play it, and because of that the install base of VR is a little bit less, but there's more opportunity to come up with something new, because there are a few VR experiences out there. So maybe VR is the right answer to you. Or if it's just sheer number of people, very few companies compete with mobile games. Like, mobile game install bases are massive. So if you want like the majority of people to play your game as possible, it's that. Or maybe it's an art game. Maybe what you want is to apply for art grants and to make games that are not monetizable, because but they tell a specific meaning, and that's what you're looking for. The answers could vary, but if you don't know what's out there, if you don't take the time to think about what you want and to consider all the different possibilities of game making, uh, then everyone's going to be funneled through the same path, and a lot of people are just going to drop off because they're not going to find fulfillment. They're not all necessarily going to find fulfillment in the same places.
So in all of this, and this is fantastic advice. I wish more people were saying things like this. This is both realistic, but also hopeful that there is a place for you. But let's have a more nuanced conversation about what you want that place to be based on where you want to be. Now, how much do you involve your family in some of these decisions? Because there's no shortage of award shows that you've seen, that I've seen, where people get up and accept an award, and the first thing out of their mouth is, I want to thank my family for allowing me to be absent for so long.
I do not make any decision without consulting with my wife. We're a team, 110%. So I've been pretty fortunate. I've actually spent my career in Montreal. Montreal is one of the rare places in the world where you're actually able to jump from game job to game job and stay in the same city.
Yeah.
But there were actually 4 other times where I seriously almost left the city because of a job opportunity, and to left the country. Actually, all 4 times where I was going to leave the country. Once to Singapore, once it was to Texas, California, and Poland, and all. Yes,
Seattle was not in the mix. I mean, all the game companies here.
I've never had a job offer from Seattle. I mean, it doesn't. It's not that I didn't look. It's just these opportunities, sometimes they come. You get headhunted.
I'm surprised.
There are other hubs that missed me completely as well, but those were 4, and I might even have forgotten one. But there were 4 instances where we made we came close to making a life-changing decision, but we did it together, and it didn't work out. And I don't know why it didn't work out all 4 times, but that was actually, I know specifically why, but there were all different reasons. I just don't know why it was in the cards that I would stay in Montreal my entire career, but I'm happy. This is my community now, and I love it. But every single one of those decisions is a life decision, of course, that I'm not going to make alone. But even when it's to stay in the same city and to change jobs, I discuss it at length with my wife, not because I feel a sense of response, necessarily that I have to. It's because my wife's my best friend and my confidant, and I ask her advice for everything that I do anyway. So of course I'm going to get her opinion on this. But she needs to understand. It's just a reality. This is the truth of it, and this is the secret to a happy marriage as well. Of course, is you have to treat it like an absolute partnership. But my family's number one for me. I will drop everything for them 100%, and I have in the past. I've said this situation isn't working out because I'm not able to spend time with my family, and I left the situation and went elsewhere. So this is it for me. This is the deal breaker. This is what's going to decide everything else, is whether my wife is on board or not. Thankfully, she's always been incredibly supportive. Whenever she's not on board with something, it's always because she's out of concern for my health or my well-being. I recognize this. She's more than once told me to turn down the very lucrative job that's going to potentially, kill me out of sheer, amount of hours of work or whatnot. Yeah. So that's and that, so she gives me really good counsel. So of course, why wouldn't I listen? But also, every change I make affects her and my kids, so they have to be involved as well. My kids are getting older now, so they're starting to be part of the conversation. When they were younger, that was less the case for obvious reasons.
Mhm.
Although they really do love Warner Brothers, I have to admit, there are some perks from Warner Brothers that they absolutely adore. Yeah, we get like free comics and things like that. So
Oh, well, I mean, no, you can't leave that job. No,
no,
you
of
can't
course
leave
not.
that. Absolutely.
It's a done
One
deal.
thing I haven't mentioned to the chat is, chat, if you have questions
Yeah.
for Osama, and it just so happens Osama loves to teach, type those in with exclamation point questions, exclamation mark questions, and they'll show up a little easier for us. Because use this opportunity. This is so much wisdom, obviously, going on here that
I don't do
you're
well
gonna
with
get some unique
compliments, but thank
answers.
you.
What's that?
Dr. I'm not very good with compliments, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Let me just tell you, going on behind the scenes, how how excited the entire team was at Take This when you agreed to do this.
Are you kidding? I was excited that you would invite me. I get to spend the day with you. It's awesome.
Oh, that's very kind. Um,
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
so the so we do already have a question that what surprised you most about becoming an educator?
Um, okay, so I probably could think of other answers, but one of the things that pops up is I never expected to befriend my students after they graduate. A lot of my students, my program is a little bit different. So we have people who are even older than me who are my students, because a lot of people changed career paths. But even like, so I would have students anywhere between the age of 18, which was the minimum, to 44. And I'm 42 now. So like this is like in the past. Um, I had one student in particular who had a kid that was almost as old as I was, which was very interesting. But one of the things I didn't expect is almost regardless of age, after my students graduate, there's a good chance I was going to befriend them and actually be friends with them. That is not a thing that, you just don't imagine. I'm not friends with any of my teachers from college or university. Zero, none whatsoever. I was kind of friendly with a few where I would like see them in the hall and like catch up a little bit. But friends, and a big part of that is because of the way our industry works. That's not the only reason, but a big part of that is because many times those students, once they graduate, I would hire them as part of my team, or they would be hired and like join the industry, and they would become my peers. So we'd see each other at networking events, and we already had that kind of trust or relationship. But it's still not a thing I had expected going in, and it continues to happen.
So just by being a teacher, it
Yeah.
expands your network.
Yes.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay. I wouldn't have thought of that either. That's fantastic. Um,
Absolutely.
how did you've talked about being a generalist.
Yeah.
You talked about finding the role that suits you, finding the purpose that suits you, the meaning, the thing that really drives your passion forward within the game industry. But how did you figure out exactly what dev role suited you the best?
I'm not saying to do it my way, but I tried them all. I pretty much it. So when I first started at a mobile company, I was the only designer on the team, and then I had a junior assigned to me. So I did all the designs. I was in a fortunate situation where the teams were about 5 people big, and I was either the only designer or one of 2 designers. So I would do the UI design, the AI design, the gameplay design. That like I would be responsible for all of the design. That's actually one thing I didn't talk about. Where I said in AAA, you're often going to like if you're a junior, you're often going to be relegated to doing somewhat repetitive tasks. It depends on the company. Like because there are big AAAs and small AAAs. And small AAAs, you're actually probably going to have some kind of autonomy and given your own features and whatnot. The bigger AAAs, that kind of shrinks. But for small companies, it's the opposite. If you're a person who's who needs mentorship and leadership and who needs a guiding hand, small companies might not be the place for you. Maybe AAA would be better because you're going to be left to your own a lot. And I was. I remember I basically invented the state machine because I didn't know what a state machine was, and I needed to design an AI for a poker game. And I reverse engineered it and figured it out. And I'm like, okay, I guess this is how it's supposed to work. Because, I tried to solve the problem of an AI, and I had never made a behavior tree before. And so this is the time, don't forget, I didn't study game design. I studied political science, completely unrelated field. And I made little crappy flash games as part of my portfolios and maps for Unreal. So I never made it and anything that resembles a real AI that was with any complexity at all. So when I was tasked to design an AI for a poker game, I was like, what does an AI look like? And I had to like come up with that myself. And it was fun. It was really fun to do that. And I became kind of somewhat of an AI designer. I had to do the same thing when I had to think of how do you design a camera. I worked at a rhythm game, kind of similar to Guitar Hero or Rock Band, where I had to design the cameras that, like that we don't even think about, that pan across the screen and put some musicians in focus. And I'm like, well, what does a good camera system look like, and how do I like, oh, I discovered splines and now I know how splines work and how to put the cameras on them and how to like spawn them and despawn them and to create all the rules for it. It's something I had to discover because of the company was smaller. But that also helped me, like with every single thing that I tried, it helped me. It helps you, for me personally, it helped me like figure out what I wanted to do more and what I wanted to stay clear of. But because of my own personality, like I even was a narrative designer. It was probably my favorite specialization. I really love narrative design. But even then, after a few years, I opted to not be a narrative designer anymore because I wanted to try something else. Even and I went from narrative design to mission design, which was related, and I loved it. It was really fun. And then I moved on to economy design, like progression design, which was completely different. And every time I had an opportunity to respecialize, I did game mode design. I did it all. But every time I tried it, like you take a little bit of what you learned from before, even in slightly unrelated. I'm talking about just game design here, but this applies, by the way, across the board to a lot of different fields. If you're in art as well, you might find that you love to create props or characters in 3D models. You might find that you're actually better at textures, and that's what you want to specialize. You might find that you're a rigger, or maybe you really like animating. All these are related, and all of these overlap in some ways. But if you don't give it a try, or at least look into it a little bit, you won't know if you're going to like it or not. And the mental image of, but I just want to work in games, it doesn't work for most people. It's like, that's not, working in games is not what's going to occupy your mind while you're doing your
I work
task.
in
It's the
games.
actual. Yes, exactly. Yes, it means a lot of different things. It doesn't mean anything specific. So like, focus on what it is about games that you want to be working on. Like, what's that specific thing that's going to make you wake up in the morning and look forward to your day? Because the this umbrella like feeling of working in games, that's not a, a thing that will drive you forward. That's not a thing that's going to excite you going forward. It's going to um, what's the word I'm looking for? It's going to fade after a while. And if you don't have a strong team, or if you don't have a project you're passionate about, or if you don't like the craft that you're working on itself, then you're not going to have anything to fall back on once the magic of I work in games fades, and it does fade.
So you've got that novelty of
Yes.
you've got that sort of honeymoon period of
Yes.
you've realized your dream, but you don't maybe even realize what your dream is.
Yes.
And after that novelty fades, as novelty always does, there's
Yeah.
no sustainable internalized motivation there,
That's right.
because this nebulous concept, which you may have very poorly defined, has not come to pass because you probably really poorly defined it. You don't know where
Yes.
the finish line is.
Exactly. And it's okay to move the goalposts. It's okay to change your mind and say, okay, you know what? I tried this. I thought it was going to be like this. I'm going to like it wasn't what I was looking forward to. I really want to do this. What if like what's really your calling is to write books about games? Maybe that's what you prefer to do, and maybe you're going to shift from writing books to being a games journalist, and you're like, I'm happier in that field. If you don't allow yourself a little bit of room to explore these avenues, if you're happy where you are, you're happy where you are, and that's totally okay. And I'm not telling you to go elsewhere, but if for the juniors who don't know yet, just keep an open mind as you're trying things to see if maybe you try your hand at, if you have an opportunity, try your hand a little bit at something else, just enough
There's that catch
to
that
see if it's
cast a wide net thing again.
exactly.
So I actually have a question for you before we
Of
get
course.
to Will O'Neill's question, because there's a meaty answer to that question. Um, but what about experience outside of the game industry? Bringing that in, there's one person I have in mind, and I think she's probably in the chat. I'm thinking about take this as operations director, who has had pretty much every job you could think of, and some you wouldn't.
Hmm.
I don't remember how many zoos she has operated,
Oh wow.
uh, as well as done, glass art and testing coral reef sustainability in the Caribbean. Um, Two zoos. She is here, and I, it, having this breadth of experience brings something truly unique to what she does. So, what would you say to people who are coming into the game industry from some, I don't know, some seemingly unrelated field like restaurant management?
Yeah, it's like everything is related. You're going to be able to pull from those experiences. um there's two things I'd like to say, two very, very different things. One is that definitely my past work experiences, I was a shipping agent, and it taught me people skills. It taught me how to talk to people from all over the world. It actually was a very strong asset because the gaming industry involves people from all over the world, and I was able to hit the ground running and know how to behave around people from different backgrounds or with different beliefs or who speak different languages. So that was an asset, if for that reason and no other reason. But there were other reasons too, because the paperwork that's involved in the shipping industry is so boring and mundane that everything else in comparison, it created this, like it made me very resilient to any documentation that was tedious. And there parts of the job are really fun and parts of the job are not fun. But the not fun parts, for me, like everyone is different. For me, because they have some level of creativity in them, were a lot more fun than the ones from the shipping industry, which was carry over this number from this square to this one. You know, they probably have an app that did half my job. They probably have an app now that did half my job. This is like a long time ago. This is pre iPhone, like a long time ago. Um, but a lot of the things will carry over. And think about what carries over and put that in your cover letters, because find a good way to put a spin on it. A lot of people make the mistake of whenever they apply and they put things in their cover letters, they repeat things that everybody else is saying, and those things just completely like they go unnoticed. Like team player, I don't know how many times I've seen the words team player. They lose meaning completely. Instead of, like, the show don't tell, don't tell me you're a team player. Talk about a situation where you actually can show your leadership or your team, the teamwork skills where they shown. Talk about a game jam that you joined with people that you've never met before and how you accomplished something as a result, like something like that. Like give me something more concrete. Past work experience fits well here. And I'm
Something
about
that
to contribute.
differentiates you.
Yes, what makes you special? What's a different angle? Because if you're just going to say I'm a perfectionist, I'm a workaholic, I'm a team player, I hear these all the time, and they're not as good as you think they are, and everybody always says them, and you might as well not include them. Like have a cover letter where I'm hanging on every word, and you can, and take the time, even if it's short, take the time to craft one and get some advice from people in the industry to what a good cover letter is, because I do read the cover letters. I know many people do. Some people skip them, but many people do, and they make a difference. Now I'm partially going to contradict myself, so I apologize in advance, but you have to know the reality of it. Is there's also stigma from against people who come from other disciplines, oftentimes, and this is not universal, but you have to be aware of it and listen in for it. So if you're in a job interview, listen for cues where people um, I'm gonna come out and say it because it's true, but because the stigma exists on many different levels. A lot of AAA devs look down on devs that are not AAA, as an example. So you have experience in mobile or experience in different, even in indie. I see a lot of AAA devs say, okay, but can you bring that AAA polish or something along those lines? So listen in for those cues if you're fortunate to get um, the opportunity to have an interview and try to speak to that and say, I could have brought in more polish or whatever it is that you think that the person worries about. But the stigma also exists sometimes the other way around, where indie devs, if you have a little bit of junior AAA experience, indie devs might turn their nose on you and say, oh, but like, have you ever done anything creative or artistic? Or it exists all over the place, but it almost universally exists for people who are, and I'm saying this as someone who lived this, exists from people who are changing industries. It's not a hard wall, it's not a hard barrier, and I still encourage people who want to try their hands at game making to give it a try. But just because you've crafted this perfect argument why this is an asset doesn't mean you should dwell on the thought a long time in an interview if the person is not receptive to it. Listen to those cues and read the room and maybe focus on the tasks instead of the industries. I know a lot of writers in games that I've spoken to in the past. They don't consider like script writing for movies or TV shows to be that relevant, for example. So talk about the actual like to games, because so talk about what you've done in the meanwhile. Did you pick up twine? Did you learn about triggers? Can you, because I'm not saying that the writing itself isn't good. I'm saying that they don't consider just because you were able to write for TV or for movies or for you've wrote a novel that would translate into being able to write for games. So listen to what questions they're asking you and don't dwell on, but my book sold this many copies, or my short story won an award, because they like listen to what they're asking. If there is stigma there because of your experience, you're going to be able to have a rebuttal, but not if you're not listening into the cues. Say, well, yes, this is a book I wrote, so I could show you that I'm good at writing books, or writing in general, but I've also picked up twine and I know how to do a branching like dialogue tree, and I understand how triggers work in games, so I'll be able to take the knowledge that I have here, the background that I hear, and transition it into games seamlessly. So without giving more examples, that's kind of what I'm going at. Like, it's a strength, but make sure don't make it a liability. I don't know if that's the right word.
Well,
Does that make sense?
I mean, it sounds like you're approaching sort of in-group elitism.
Yeah.
That's going to, and it's an interesting and probably good thing to point out that no matter what career you go into, no matter what group you go into, there's going to be some level of gatekeeping from
Yeah.
various corners of those groups, that industry. And so even if you're a best-selling fantasy novelist, they might say, well, you've never done games, even though you could say, yeah, if you're feeling really sassy, but you've never done story, I've seen your games. And what I bring to the table is an understanding of narrative structure that some of your games have lacked, and I can bring in story hooks and tension and character arcs in a way that hasn't been there necessarily. And oh, by the way, New York Times bestseller, I really can bring in character arcs. And so for you're saying that those folks need to figure out where their skill set fits in, how to
Yeah.
speak the language to make it sound like it fits in, but also
That's right.
understand not everybody's receptive.
Exactly. And try to just keep keep an open mind and listen in for those cues of who's receptive, who's not, and kind of adjust your method of delivery to that. In some situations, people have already made up their minds about you beforehand. You can't do anything about that, but at the very least, it's good practice, and you could like figure that out and know what to bring next time. Oh, what were the hangups? You could even ask. Like one of my favorite things to do in an interview at the very end is when they ask you, well, do you have any questions? I'll ask one or two legitimate questions that I have, usually revolving around the culture of the company and their work life balance or anything like that. And then at the end, I end it with, well, yeah, how did I do? I would like to know how I did. In the interview process, I think it's a very fair question because it could end in a few ways. They could either say, you did great, and then you're ending on a positive note and you feel good about it. Or they could say, well, you did well, but we're concerned about this. And that either gives you a chance to say, oh, well, I could speak more to that, and gives you a chance at a rebuttal. That's something that you might have had before. Or at the very least, if you're like, well, I can't do anything about that, at least you'll know for the next interview what you're lacking. Like, it's not, so a lot of people, they ask the wrong question. They're like, how can I get hired here? Instead of asking, how do I get the skills that will make me desirable for this job? Because if you have the skills, then you're going to be in a position of power. You're going to be deciding whether you want the job or not, and that's a better position to be than to have someone give you a chance and then you're on the other end. So like, position it that way. Interviewing is a skill like any other, so you could approach the interview process and try to learn from it. What are your strong points, what are your weak points, learn about the company, learning about the person you're interviewing, ask them questions. Like, don't just be there on the receiving end of questions. That's not going to be to your benefit or their benefit either, but really like the
interaction with them, get
yes,
feedback, show you can work with that.
absolutely.
And it also sounds like you're touching on, there's a quote that Steve Martin has said about getting into the film industry or any sort of creative industry, and there's plenty of overlaps. And one of the things he said was something to the effect of, be so undeniably good that they can't ignore you.
Yes. Oh, I love it. That's a great quote.
He's a quotable guy. So going to this question from Will O'Neill, do you think there are any easy changes that AAA studios can make to support parents? And I want to expand that to studios in general.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, AAA studios are going to have different needs than indie studios and mid-level game devs, first-party studios under a big corporate umbrella are going to be a little different. So at differing levels, what changes can be made to support parents and increase sustainability for veterans in this industry who leave in enormous numbers?
Almost always these changes revolve around schedules. It's almost always about flexibility of schedules. And honestly, and I say this as a parent who's been in the industry for close to 14 years now, I'm seeing huge improvements on this front on my side, like from the companies, not just that I've worked for, but also speaking to other people from different companies, at least in my corner of the world, at least from Montreal. I've noticed a lot more flexibility. I remember instances where people were like, well, I have to go pick up my kids. And there was disdain, like sour looks from management. That doesn't happen anymore. And I think a lot of it has to do with because managers right now more often than not have kids themselves, so they have no choice but to be more understanding.
They had to be
So I think
long enough to have kids.
exactly, when that wasn't the case in the past. When I was hired in the industry, as I mentioned, I was 27 when I joined the industry. I was 5 years older than the average person in the company that I was in as a junior. And my first few bosses that I had were all younger than me. And I had a kid a few months into my first job in the industry. And it took a long time before one of my peers also had a kid. Like I was one, this is a very different scenario back then. Now I could count many parents who I work with, and all during COVID times had to ask for accommodations because of now their kids are not in school and they have to be homeschooled, and now their schedules are not flexible. Or I've been on so many Zoom calls where the kids are literally sitting on the lap of the person and they're trying to listen and trying to like, no, don't color on this my notebook. You color on your notebook. And I've I've seen all of this firsthand, and I've heard the stories from other parents, like other team leads and other people who work in the industry. Um, like I'm not saying it's of course not perfect everywhere, but I'm saying I think it's almost always schedule related. That's it. Like that we're our needs as parents otherwise are the same as most other people. We just need more time generally because we have to work with the schedule of another human being who may be
But you've got
sick.
a whole
So we
different team you're working with at home, and they have
exactly
different needs.
exactly. So you might need more sick days. That's also a scheduling thing because when they're sick, you might not be able to work. You might need to leave early or come in late or take a break in between or leave to pick them up or what. So it's I can't think of anything else that's not accommodations that revolve around schedules. So flexibility of schedules, number one, and I don't think they should be unique to parents. And I say this as a parent. I think everyone should have the same flexibility in their schedule as much as possible because people struggle with different things. And flexibility, it's been proven time and time again. If you trust people and you give them the benefit of the doubt, they're going to be working better for you and more for you and not the other way around. But when you police them and you like keep them to a very rigid schedule, um, that's not going to work out the same way.
Well, to jump on that point, there are 6 factors that are thought of when it comes to burnout. And control, an element of control and ownership over one's time or one's projects, that is a big one for a lot of people. And if you give, yes, I'm breaking out the IO psych. I'm getting proper heckling from Dr. Dunlap. But yeah, so a lot of what you're talking about for career sustainability, it is about a degree of control over one's projects, the ownership of things, instead of being shoved into things with very little ownership.
Absolutely. And like I said, different people want different levels of control, especially early on in their careers as well. Some people are more independent; they like to figure things out. Other people, they need to be taught, or there are different types of managers, and there's different situations where managers have to adjust based on their different employees. So all of that is something that you have to navigate and be communicative with your manager. And if you're fortunate enough to have a manager who's understanding of this, things are just going to go better. Because if like some people, like micromanaging is used in a really negative way, but because most of the time it's not a good thing. But there are situations where people need to be micromanaged. They want to be micromanaged, or like, this is a new task, I've never done it before, I really could use a little bit of hand holding at the beginning, and now that I know it, okay, take off the training wheels, I'm good to go. It's more about like the balance between these two things. So I completely agree with the point on control. I'm not 100% sure it's a clear cut line. I remember having an instance where I had one employee at one point who I thought was brilliant and trusted completely and kept saying, keep going, you're doing well. And she came back later and she said, I don't know if I'm doing well because you keep saying that all the time, and I really would like you to give me be a little bit more directive with me, please, because I have a lot of anxiety. And I'm like, oh, I read this situation wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, let me be a little bit more directive now with you for a little while until you gain the confidence.
I mean, if we're gonna get into like the factors of burnout, the six that are commonly cited are one, a lack of control, two, a lack of reward, whether that is positive feedback, whether that is personal fulfillment, whether that's fiscal remunerations. So let's see, reward, control, just exhaustion of workload, community, a sense of belonging in the company, and I'd say there's 6 things. I can name 5 of them. Let's see: community, belonging, reward, justice.
Kelly, help him out.
Oh, wait a minute! No, I've got books here. That's right. I'm in my office.
Of course you are.
Let's see: workload, control, reward, community, fairness, values.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, that's a big one. If you don't
Yeah.
have the same values as as your employer, that's going
Yeah,
to
I mean,
burn
if
you
you're
out
doing,
for sure.
if you know, for me, I love helping people.
Yeah.
I also happen to be kind of personable. I like to think anyway. And
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly.
and but if I'm selling cars on commission and my goal is to just make as much money as possible, I'm not going to last long because that doesn't match my values.
I agree.
But you've been kind of talking about things that fall in line with all of this the entire time. That figuring out what you want, figuring out what works for you in terms of workload, figuring out your values, figuring out what the company can provide you in terms of rewards, whether it's fiscal, whether it's personal.
Yeah.
You've been talking about all of this, and all of this leads to a more sustainable career.
Absolutely. And then you'll get.
That's fantastic.
I mean, I think I came about it from a different angle, but yeah, the conclusion is the same. Not everyone, like, you have to find the shoe that fits you, right? That's really what it's about. And it's not just the fit, but like the look of it and the whole feeling that you have when you have it. It's the same. Like, I've worked at so many workplaces where I've seen one person who's extremely happy sitting right next to someone who's absolutely miserable doing the exact same job, enough to know that there's no one perfect scenario, and anyone who paints a perfect scenario before actually living that experience is just potentially setting themselves up for disappointment. That's just the reality of it. Just be open-minded. Yeah.
So, okay. Seeming as we've been now talking for an hour and a half, and I just,
It went by like this, though.
I know well, you've got a lot of amazing things to say, and I knew you would. That's part of the reason we were all so excited. So let's talk about some really important questions. Where do you get your hats?
Okay, so my favorite brand of baseball cap, which is the flat bill snapback, is called Decky, DECKY, and they have an assortment of different ones. So if you go, you could get it from their website, or you could just like buy the same brand from Amazon. They're reasonably priced, and they're really nice. So that's my favorite brand. But to be honest, I'm a little brand agnostic. If I see another nice flat bill snapback that isn't a Decky, I will still buy it. I don't only have Deckies, but Deckies are usually my go-to. They're my filler replacement, because I have a hat for each color. So they're the ones that I fill the color. If I need a red hat. Of course you don't.
This is the small wall.
Absolutely.
There's 15 more in the hallway, plus the entire bin of flat caps.
Oh, I had to do a little bit of a cleanup. I'm down to 18 baseball caps. I had way more before because some were worn, some were like old, and I was like, you know what, it's time to like rotate them out. But yeah, I'm gonna like 18 is definitely not enough, so I'm gonna be buying some more. I'm lacking some color combinations.
Oh my god! I gotta get you into I still think like a flat bill Ivy cap is gonna work for you.
I'll give it a shot. I'll try anything. I have other hats too. I have a cowboy hat, and I have a fez, and I have a straw hat. I have other hats as well. They're just not my go-tos, right? Those are my party hats.
No. I mean, a good baseball cap. Everybody has their workhorse hat. Everybody has their just go-to. God, that's okay. I didn't realize you had that many. Wow. So
now I have that few. I used to have more. Yes.
Take this to work. We're gonna work on that because I found a hat that works for you. I think it's the trucker hat with the goose on it.
An untitled goose?
No.
Street Fighter.
First
I
one?
could actually give you. No, it's actually Street Fighter 2.
Okay.
But I could give you a million different answers, and they would all be true. I could have also said Tetris. I could have said Final Fantasy 6. I could have said Street Fighter 3. I could like there's so many games that fit that bill. Whenever those lists come around, and how like what are your top 10 favorite video games? At one point, I wrote 5 different lists of 10, and all of them were truthful. It's so hard. It's so hard to just narrow it down.
It really is. But what's
Yeah.
it? So Street Fighter 2, you're going old school. That's 1991,
Yeah.
1992.
Yeah.
What is it about that game?
My fondest memory playing a video game is that I remember taking my little brother at the time to the arcades, and he was like 6 years old. I was like 12, and he could barely reach over the arcade cabinets. And it was my first time playing Street Fighter 2, and he wanted to play as well. So I popped in 2 quarters, and I took Guile because he looked like the main character, and I figured he would be strong. And he took Dalsim because he couldn't see really what he was doing, and he just pressed. It like moved it around and pressed, and I couldn't get near him because he kept like hitting me with his stretchy arms. Like this is before I learned how to do a Sonic Boom or Hadouken. I was just moving forward, and I got
And he had the
frustrated.
reach advantage.
He had the reach. He had the reach. And I remember him laughing so hard because he had never beat me at a video game before, legitimately. And that was such a pleasant experience that we started playing Street Fighter together all the time. And now I have a big family. I play Street Fighter with all my siblings. Some play less than others, but like there's at least 2 brothers that play a lot, and we compete all the time. And it started from that era back then.
Oh, that's one. That is such a great memory of games.
Yes, absolutely.
That is just so, again. Could you get more wholesome?
I don't know. I could try.
Okay. Other important questions. What's your favorite tea that y'all drink on the Habibis?
So I like a lot of different teas. Depends on my mood. I think if you're talking about pure like actual tea, I like Earl Grey tea. If you're talking about like cultural teas, my favorite is Numi Basra, which is an Iraqi tea made from dried lime. It's actually really hard to find, but you could potentially make it yourself. If you're talking about just like chilling, just the like the flavor of a tea, which is not really a tea, it's rooibos. I really like. It's more like flower petals, like more than tea. So like I have teas for different occasions. But like my go-to, I just want tea is probably Earl Grey. That's just
Okay.
like yeah.
And as you're talking, because one of the things, I don't know if you know this about me or not, I love food, and I love the history of food,
Yes.
and I love I truly believe you can learn so much about people if you just learn the history of their food.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
now I know so little about Iraqi cuisine, and you're about to send me down a rabbit hole.
Good. Enjoy. So Numi Basara is actually it should be a tea that's drank with either sugar or honey, because it's actually sour because it's made from dried lime. So if you have it just on its own, it's still good, like it really is, but might not be for everyone, right? But if you add a little bit of honey or sugar to it, honey, especially honey, it just tastes heavenly. It's incredible. It's so good.
I'm excited. I'm gonna try and find this. I am going to try it, and I'm gonna be so excited to tell you about it. And
because there's an art to like drinking different teas, right? Like in Earl Grey, I put milk and I don't sweeten at all. Rooibos, I just drink it the way it is. But for Numi Basra, I put honey and no milk. And like every tea has its own approach that like it changes the flavor, changes the texture completely. So yeah. What about you? What's your favorite tea?
oh boy, I will often go if I can get my hands on it on a regular basis. I love genmaicha.
Ooh.
I don't know if you've ever had that, but
No.
it is green. This is a Japanese thing, and when rice was made in giant cast iron or bronze or copper, whatever metal they use, I think cast iron pots, you had the toasted stuck on bits at the bottom that were browned.
Yeah.
And they scraped those off, and then they
can't wait to try it. I'm really
it's
looking
good.
forward to it.
We're gonna just put this in my chat. That's what
Of
we're looking
course.
at in the chat. It's so good. It's so good. But other than that, I actually go with Earl Grey and I don't put anything in it.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
the bergamot and the almost lavender flavor. Incidentally,
Yeah.
my first really good shaving soap was meant to mimic Earl Grey.
No way.
Yeah, it's fantastic stuff. And you could smell like Earl Grey tea all day. This is gonna turn into beard chat in a moment.
It always does, doesn't it?
But I think this is probably a good place to call it for today.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Thank
you
you.
so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. May I just take a moment to wish everybody Ramadan Kareem, because it's actually the beginning of Ramadan here in Montreal. It's sunset
Is it
now.
really?
Yeah, that's the beginning of the holy month. Like as of
so you're hungry right now.
No. Okay, so the way tomorrow is going to be the first day.
Oh, okay. Tomorrow's the first fasting day. Okay.
Yes. So the day, like the day in the lunar calendar starts in the evening of the night before.
That's right.
So,
that's right. Okay.
Yeah. So sunset now, that's the beginning of the day, and the end of the day is sunset tomorrow.
Okay.
So,
I felt terribly. I'm like, I'm
no.
now. You are hungry.
No. Don't. I would have told you beforehand. I would have told you maybe we're gonna move this a little bit lower. So, because like I'm not as I'm not as pleasant when I haven't eaten all day. Let's be honest.
We're keeping it real with Osama during Ramadan.
Of course. No, but that starts tomorrow. So I just wanted to wish everybody a happy Ramadan, Muslim or not. Like it's a festive time for everyone.
Well, you as well. Thank you a million times over. And I think our chat got a lot of wonderful information out of this. They had some great questions. You, as always, had wonderfully insightful answers. Chat, thank you for all of your questions. And if you want to see more stuff like this, please make sure to follow, subscribe, so we can keep bringing our mental health mission to the game community. Dr. Kelly, I need to ask you who we gonna raid tonight. Give everybody a second. Who should we raid tonight? Who do we see that's available to be raided? Oh yeah, no, let's totally raid Nihon Tiger. And so Solid Plasma. Ooh. I will let you decide that, Dr. Kelly. And so thank you, Osama. Yeah, please give our best to your family. They're just wonderful people, and we will look forward to having you on at some point in the future.
Anytime. Thank you very much again for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. Much love to everyone.
Bye.
Bye.